And now here is Paul A. Ibbetson, the czar of radio coolness.
All right, radio listeners, today we have a return guest and Steve Goreham. Steve is the executive director of the Climate Science Coalition of America, an independent, non-political association of scientists, engineers, and concerned citizens working to inform Americans about the realities of climate science and the economics of renewable energy. He's got a brand new book, and it's a kicker. I'm really enjoying it. It's called The Mad, Mad, Mad World of Climatism, Mankind and Climate Change Mania. And Steve Gorham, we'd like to welcome you back to the Conscience of Kansas radio program.
Well, thanks, Paul. Great to join you again.
Well, I think you're knocking it out of the park with this new book. I've been into it. I'm 3/4 of the way through it. And I would tell people in Radioland, we're going to mark it up as our Christmas listed books for climate change reality for this season. It's a fun book, Steve, and that's one of the things that I think is so important about trying to market ideas on this subject. Is there's so much data and information that you have to get out here, and so you've done the heavy researching, but being able to present it to people in ways that they can get through it, understand it, and absorb it. You have to make it somewhat entertaining, and you've done that. So kudos. Maybe tell folks a little bit about why you wrote the book and what's inside.
Well, thanks, Paul. That's very high praise. Yeah, it's a follow-on to my first book, which was called Climatism, and today the world's in the grip of a madness. Today we just got finished with the United Nations conference in Doha, Qatar, and more than 190 nations there have leaders who are trying to stop the planet from warming up, and it's really crazy. The science no longer shows that man-made emissions have a significant effect on the climate. So the follow-on book I titled The Mad, Mad, Mad World of Climatism, and I tried to put some humor in and some cartoons and made it color and just talk about the wackiness of a world gripped in this delusion and all the crazy things that are going on.
You would think, Steve, and call me crazy, but you would think that once there was scientific proof out there that we're no longer in this warming cycle, that we've stopped that the whole thing would be over with. I mean, am I crazy to say that?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Well, there's a number of factors. One, the world jumped to a conclusion back in the 1980s. I think maybe I mentioned last time on your show, but Dr. James Hansen of NASA came before Congress and said he was 99% sure that the Earth was warming up. And within 4 years at the Rio de Janeiro Earth Summit, 41 nations had signed a treaty saying they would reduce emissions. And now we've had 20 years of funding and all sorts of initiatives to try and stop the planet from warming. So we've created whole industries and a lot of vested interests in this. And then I think the third factor is people are a little bit impacted by what they call extreme events. And we've had this Hurricane Sandy brouhaha recently, and people tend to think something like that has never happened before, so there must be something wrong. I think that's a little bit of human nature there. So we've got all these factors involved that to continue to drive this forward.
I think you're absolutely right. We've had several specialists talk about that. And of course, Al Gore was immediately on the hurricane and trying to solidify that natural disasters are traumatic on the American psyche, no matter what it was. I remember when Mount St. Helens blew, a couple decades ago, and people were speculating, why did that happen, and blah, 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 blah. So that's traumatic. And so if you're going to have someone that's going to try to be a fear merchant off of that and tie that in, whether there's any science or not, they're going to get some traction. If you've got the mainstream media and those mainstream media outlets also just putting the pedal to the metal, you can obviously scare a lot of people. But it seems like to me that time is not on Al Gore's side as far as this, that there are more and more people that are coming forward of credential that say this is not the case. We're not, the earth is not about to burst into flames. We don't need to turn our capitalistic system, our industrial complex system, the things that make America prosperous, upside down, reduce us to a hunter-gatherer society to save the planet. More voices are joining with the great work you're doing.
Yeah, I think so, and I think there's some factors involved too. We've not had increase in global temperatures for more than 10 years. A report in England came out said it was 16 years.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the cycles of the Earth, which are the things that are primarily responsible for the short-term cooling, Earth goes through cycles like El Nino. There's a big cycle in the Pacific called the Pacific Decadal Oscillation. That has entered a cool phase. We have the sun that's less active than it was a couple decades ago. And as meteorologist Joe DeLeo says, the last holdout is the Atlantic cycle, the Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation. That's still on the warm side, but when that moves into a cool phase, we're likely to get a decade or two of cooler weather, and then we'll see what happens here.
Well, you think, again, right now we have, and this is all over the country, but your book to me and to our radio listeners, I believe, is germane because we have a big green push through Kansas that's been going on for, a couple decades almost, but certainly in the last 10 years. We've had this major push because we have this current stream that goes through Kansas that those that want to push the windmills so much are big, and we're spending tens of millions of dollars, tax dollars, subsidizing these companies, and we've got these windmills popping up left and right, and we've got politicians deciding whether we should renew those tax credits for those windmills. If not, all of these businesses that are in Kansas that have been popping up, people that have been working about a year and a half at a job are going to lose their jobs because without the funding, without the money being taken out of your taxes, they're not viable in the marketplace. And all these people that were told they were going to have long-term jobs are not. So it's a germane subject right here in the state of Kansas.
Yeah, it's a tough situation. Our governments have been distorting the economies in many ways by offering these incentives for green energy, as you say. And I just 2 weeks ago posted an article in the Washington Times called "How's Your Green Energy Stock Doing?" And it talked about the Renix index, which is an index of the top 30 renewable energy companies in the world, and it hit a new low about 3 or 4 weeks ago of 146, and 3 years ago it was up over 1,900. So we've had a drop of about 95% in the last 3 years in all these renewable energy companies, and that's because the subsidies are being cut all over the world. England, Germany, Netherlands, Greece, Italy, Spain, the United States have all cut subsidies in the last 3 or 4 years, and then plus we've had overcapacity built in China, and so these companies are all going bankrupt. And the latest joke is, how can you tell if a company's a green energy company or not? And the joke is, well, if it's in bankruptcy court, it is.
Oh, yeah. We looked at this. That's so true. We looked and read a partial list, which really took a tremendous amount of airtime, but I wanted people to get to see how much money we were putting in stimulus that went into these green companies that then went bankrupt and are no longer even creating the products. And it was amazing how much money was just flushed that should have been put into viable products. To me, the whole thing centers around whether it is market-driven versus whether it's government-mandated. And when you see this government mandates coming down, it doesn't matter how it's framed, doesn't matter what sugary wording or promises are made of what will come down the road. When it's a mandate and not market-driven, then you're going to have all these problems of it being untested as far as long-term viability. That's what we see with what's happening in Kansas. There are many specialists here. We even had a Kansas Policy Institute do a study down here. It said all these windmills that we've got, I mean, just it looks like World of Worlds up here if you're on I-70, yeah, that eventually the best thing they're going to be serving is possibly as grain mills to dump your grain in.
I'm hoping that, and it's great for the farmers. They get incentives for the companies to allow them to be put up, but they better have some money in the bank for if the company goes bankrupt. Otherwise, they're going to have these things rusting in their fields. Nobody's going to come tear them down. So I'm concerned that might be the case in some of these installations.
Yeah, and I don't begrudge a farmer that wants to get some extra money to let them build that on there. What I have the bigger problem, I understand their motivation there. I have the bigger problem is when tax subsidies, money coming out of your pocket that the government just decides for you they're going to take out and then give subsidies to these companies that they should know better are not going to last the long haul, that there's no infrastructure to take this energy that they're creating, and they're doing it through these windmills that have like a 30% efficiency rating. I mean, it's like, okay, can we just get the Keystone Pipeline? Can we just get that oil, gas, and coal that's up there with that 80% efficiency? Man, this seems very simple math here to figure out.
Yeah, that's one half of it is the subsidies. The other half is the renewable portfolio standards. We have one in Illinois, and I don't recall that you do in Kansas, but our utilities here are forced to buy an increasing amount of energy from
we got that too.
Pay fines. And so the taxpayer pays twice, once in the upfront subsidy and then later with increased costs for electricity. And I'm not anti-windmill. Let's just let them compete, cut the subsidies and mandates, and let them go at it.
Well, yeah, I'm for the free market. Eventually, they very well may get these green technologies to where they're affordable to use, where their output is tremendously high, and where they have versatility with competition in the workplace. That may very well happen there, and when that does, I'm going to be right behind it, just like I am with other things we have within the free market. And so I'm not against the technology. I'm against the government ramming it down your throat. And that's what's interesting about this book is a lot of the information that's in here. Folks, we're speaking with Steve Goreham. He's got a brand new book out called The Mad, Mad, Mad World of Climatism. I got all the mads in there, Steve. And you can get this at Amazon.com. You can get this through our website. We have it linked up so you can pick it up very easily. And, when we talk about the craziness of what's happening with the green environmentalists, the big green government people would be really behooved to go and check out your chapter 12 in your book, where you're right, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, because you truly go and document the ludicrous stuff that's going on. This is the stuff I like to lead my shows with for a humorous quip, to start programs out. There is just insulting your intelligence with some of the things they put out there. It's just amazing. What ends did you have to go to find all this stuff?
Well, it's just there's a lot of websites, and just working on it over the years, and you keep a little folder that says wacky stuff, and you just keep sticking things in it. But as you say, it really is astonishing. The problem of Australian camel gas is my favorite, I think. There's 1.2 million wild camels that roam Australia, and they munch up the foliage, and then they put out methane, a greenhouse gas, from the nose end or the tail end. Well, the government of Australia came up with a solution for this climate problem. They passed a law about a year ago called the Carbon Farming Initiative Act, which authorizes, quote, the reduction of methane emissions through the management in a humane manner of feral goats, feral deer, feral pigs, or feral camels. What they mean by management is they're going to pay carbon credits to companies to fly around in helicopters and shoot these animals. And that's going to reduce global warming. I mean, it's just crazy.
Yeah, well, that's kind of ought to upset the PETA folks out there to think that's how they're going to do that. Well, there was one spot in there in the UK where they were using the heat from a crematorium.
Yeah.
What I mean, good grief! Talk about macabre.
Yeah, I know. And they said this will be a renewable energy source as long as people keep dying. Was somebody's quote. And if you got to crank up the heat a little extra, that means we got to have a little more people dying. And then how about Spain, where they were offering subsidies that were 10 times the regular electricity rate to people to produce solar energy. If you fed it in, they paid you a factor of 10. Well, they found out that these guys were producing energy at night from midnight to 7 a.m. And they were wondering, wow, how are they doing that? Turns out they're hooking a gasoline generator up to the solar feed-in and producing solar energy with gasoline power, with diesel power, not only at nighttime but also in the day.
Just a little help from our enemy, the fossil fuel. Oh, that's amazing. Well, actually, I think there's a little more of that happening than what gets covered a lot. Now, your website out there, is it climatescienceamerica.org?
Yeah, and I also have a personal website, climatism.net.
Climatism.net. We're going to link both of those up for folks in Radioland. You simply go to our master website at IbbetsonUSA.com. We're going to have 3 links up there. We're going to have those 2, and we're going to have a simple link up to buy the book, The Mad, Mad, Mad World of Climatism, Mankind and Climate Change Mania from Steve Goreham. This book is fun. It's a simple read. And yet it's got so much information in it. And I say it's simple because you've made it fun. You've given a lot of good visuals. You have it broken down to where you can digest it. That has really been the kryptonite to a lot of folks getting this information and understanding it if it gets too technically jumbled. And you've broken it out there where it's real easy to read, very fun, and people can use this information, whether they're debating the liberal down the street or maybe their council member that wants to put in some kind of wacky green environmental junk that suppresses your rights. You have the knowledge, and knowledge is king. And Steve, of course, we want to thank you for coming on the program, talk about your book today. Do you have any parting thoughts before we sign off with you?
No, people just need to educate themselves and oppose this nonsense, and they're teaching it to their kids in school, etc. And Paul, I'm always at your service anytime. Let's talk about climate issues.
Well, this is an issue where I'm not going to let go of because it's so germane to my state, so germane to the country and the rights of everybody. Great job here, Steve, on this book, The Mad, Mad, Mad World of Climatism. Folks, buy today. And Steve Goreham, thank you so much for coming on the program today.
My pleasure, Paul.
All righty, bye-bye now.